And in 1999, she was.
First of all, thank you, Sunil and Fran and Rick and Leonard for doing, putting all the logistics together for this event. As Sunil said, I'm Kathleen Milnes. I'm the Assistant Chair of Digital Media at the Otis College of Art and Design. This year's graduating class will be our 23rd, and Otis celebrated its 100th birthday in 2018. We are the oldest art college, and this is my intern. Her name is Nora. Also, I wanted to thank one of our students, Tatiana Peters, who is graduating this year. So if any of you are looking for a fabulous motion designer, she's been doing the posters for this event and also our weekly speaker series that we do at Otis. So I'm going to moderate this discussion among our panelists for, probably 6:30, 7:30, about a little over maybe an hour and 20 minutes. And then we'll open to questions from our audience. So if you can put your questions in the Q&A, and I don't know, Sunil or Leonard, if we used to be, we could tweet them. So I don't know if you can still tweet to @SIGGRAPH-LA. So I guess maybe no, probably just put them in the chat. It's much simpler. And then we will open it. We will open it for post them in the Q&A, not the chat. Thank you. And then we'll just open it for those questions and then any questions that people want live. So you are encouraged to have your screens on if they are available. It's nice to see people. But if not, we certainly understand. We're delighted to have all of our participants that are here. And so I'm going to start with our terrific panel. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. And they'll talk about what they do and what their company does. So if my panel members could turn on their videos and audio, we have Deb Stone from Illumination, Jim Rivers from Blind Circle Games.
Blind Squirrel.
Blind Squirrel, just not doesn't have games in the title. It's a game.
Blind Squirrel Games.
Yeah, Blind Squirrel Games, right? Yep. And then and Kathleen Ruffalo from Frame Store. So everybody here, I can't see all of you. So why don't we? There we go. Why don't we start? Jim, why don't you start?
Hi, my name is Jim Rivers. I'm the senior recruiter with Blind Squirrel Games. I've been in this industry since 2004, give or take. I've seen it start from when I got into it. PlayStation 2 was getting rid of everything, and we were starting to move into PlayStation 3. Everybody is like, "Hey, how do you know how long you've been in?" You go by the PlayStations. I enjoy games. I've been a part of it I got my art degree, and the thing is I was really good at art, but I was very good at talking to people. So Blind Squirrel Games, we started off as a for-hire group, which all of you, if you're getting into the industry, really look at for-hire groups first, because it's a really great way to just get your feet wet in everything. We've been doing games for every kind of studio, EA, BioWare, Microsoft, Tencent, and for years and years, all we would do is assist them in doing all the small stuff that their groups didn't have time for. And so after a bunch of years of doing that, we had the opportunity to make our first IP, and we utilized it to get more business. And now, instead of just doing little side jobs for everybody, now we're doing whole shared development with studios like Microsoft, Tencent, who else? Amazon, and we have changed our studio entire model from just being for hire into co-development. So again, if when you are looking for work, please take a look at, there's lots of us like Blind Squirrel that are very good for you to learn at everything, because they will throw you at everything.
I appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, certainly students, they only know the big game companies. And they don't realize that there's so much going on in other places, in all the companies that are doing work, and that they are really a great place to look. So Deb, let's go with you next. Deb Stone from Illumination.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Deb. I am the Director of Talent Recruitment at Illumination. I started in feature animation, I guess, just the year after Jim did, 2005. So I was 16 something years of feature animation work. And I've been with Illumination just coming on a year now. So that's exciting. And just so everyone's aware of Illumination's setup, we have our studio headquarters based in Los Angeles. That's where a lot of our film development and our marketing team is based. And then we have our Paris studio, which is where our animation pipeline is. So we kind of have a 24-hour, in a way, animation studio going on, because when one finishes up their day, they're kind of passing information off to the other studio to get going. So that's Illumination. Pass it off to Kathleen.
How big are you? Before we
let's see. So in Santa Monica, we have about 100 people or so, maybe a little bit more when it comes to even our freelance artists. And then in Paris, it's about 800 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Decent sized studio. Yeah. Lots of films coming out too.
Okay. Kathleen Ruffalo, you're on.
Hello. So yes, I'm Kathleen. I am the recruitment manager for Framestore's US offices. So I look after our hiring for Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. Framestore, the company, just to give you some context, we're a global company. Visual effects is our main focus, very photorealistic visual effects, working in everything from feature films, episodic, commercials, and immersive experiences. Here in the US, our main focus is in the integrated advertising division, which is going to be mostly kind of commercial, episodic work, as well as some of the immersive content as well. So that's like VR, AR, MR, XR, that whole world. I've been with Framestore for going on 10 years, a little over 9 years now. Started in the LA office when we first opened, and have since kind of moved into this role that looks after all of the US positions across every department. I kind of have insight into, from interns to creative directors. So looking at the full gamut there. To give you context about Framestore's size, we're over 2,000 globally, quite easily, but have the smallest presence here in the United States. So between the three sites, we're about 300. So a little over 100 in New York, a little under 100 in Los Angeles, and about a little shy of 40 in Chicago. But yeah, we're busy and growing, so all good things.
It's always nice to hear the word busy and growing.
Yes, very different from I think last year. I don't know if I said those things, but happy to say them this year.
Now, you've all touched a little bit on kind of your territories. Do you all hire all the different kinds of, do you focus just on creative, or do you hire engineers and support staff and that sort of thing? Kathleen, maybe you can answer that question first.
Yep. So in my role, I am looking after every department. We are starting, as I said, we're getting busy to get some more help for me, which is great. And some that might focus a little bit more on the tech roles in particular. But we do have opportunities at Framestore that run the full gamut. I think a lot of people look at visual effects and just think about the artist positions and kind of forget that we also have to do all of the tech and that development work on the other side of it to execute those projects. So we do have lots of opportunities in things like pipeline, as well as some software development type roles, but those are more focused in London for our company, just to give you insight. But with those immersive experiences, as I mentioned, there's some of that development work as well. Also, I look after, administrative roles, so HR and recruitment and scheduling, producers, all of those. So
And you have no staff?
I just hired one, and I'm hopefully
my-
going to be adding another to my team, which will be great. But we also obviously have a much larger global recruitment team
Right.
that helps with all of our other regions. Framestore also recently merged with Method on the film and episodic side. So we've got a much bigger team that's kind of supporting in these newer areas that we didn't necessarily have locations in a year ago, being Melbourne and Vancouver. So much larger team globally, but small here in the US.
Well, I'm impressed. Jim, what about you? What do you recruit for?
I recruit for everything. All the way from, I'm looking for a new business director of business development. That's my highest, biggest whale I have to find, all the way down to QA. We have one studio here in Irvine. We are about to break ground in Austin, Texas for our studio out there. And then probably in the middle of summertime, we're going to be starting our Auckland, New Zealand studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but I have to find anything and everything. If the studio needs it, I have to find it.
So are you opening Austin and Auckland for what reasons?
All right.
No, tell me the truth.
Time change.
Hmm.
All right. So Irvine is good. Like all of our programmers live in Orange County
Mhm.
because, sorry to say, they can afford to. All of our artists and designers most of them live in Austin, Texas, again, because they can afford it.
Ah,
And then for the time change, because we do a lot of business with China, having one of our owners who live in Auckland, he's like, all right, let's do this. Let's open up a studio out here. So then we'll be on that timeline as well.
interesting. Interesting. Deb, what about you? What do you hire for? And
Yeah, so personally, because I work for the LA side of the studio, I hire mostly for story artists and actually pretty much the whole marketing team and any admin or HR or anything else, IT position. And then Dawn, who works with me, also she handles all the visual development roles. So that's kind of our world on the LA side. And then we have our own recruiting team in Paris, and they're recruiting for the entire animation pipeline. So Dawn and I partner with them on different things or help support them when needed. But they have their own team focused on the pipeline. And in my experience, I have recruited for the entire animation pipeline in my past. So I understand pretty much every role there is under the animation feature pipeline.
so within your companies in the areas that you serve, what's the mix between freelance and staff, and has that changed over the last 2 to 3 years? Deb, why don't you go?
Sure. So funny enough, on the LA side, from our film development standpoint, we've always hired freelance story artists and visual development artists way before COVID. That was our business model. And so we've always had remote story artists and visual development artists. On the Paris side, though, they're mostly all in-house. So that's because it's a full studio. So that's kind of the big differences between the two, is that Paris is mostly in-house and we're mostly out of house and remote. Yeah.
Do you have a physical location still in LA?
Yeah. And I mean, the production management team, the marketing team, the development team, they're all in-house most of the time. And so actually we're just trying to figure out those return to office plans and what that looks like, because we haven't gone back just yet, but it's coming.
What about you, Jim? What's your mix of freelance versus staff? in Irvine?
Well, in Irvine, we have a brand new studio that can hold 100 people, and there's 12 of us that actually come to work.
Wow.
We are 90%. Everybody can work from home. My Blind Squirrel Games is really based off of family stuff, and everybody goes, "Oh, everybody always says that," but we really are. We're saving all of our families tons of money on childcare and all this other stuff, and everybody is pretty happy with it because they just not. We asked them. We had a group meeting. Said, "Hey, who wants to come in?" And 90% of the studio was like, "Nope." So then we changed our entire business model to everybody is remote, with exception of operations and a lot of developers that just don't like working from home and rather work in a studio. So those are the 5 that aren't operations. Everybody else.
But is it mostly staff or freelancers, or what?
Oh, we have about a dozen, well, not necessarily freelancers, or just contractors. Either another studio, because I know the animation studios, we all share back and forth. Somebody does something really well at this, but they do really bad at this. So we share each other's like payload around. And so it's been pretty fun as far as that goes, because honestly, it's really great to be able to hire people from all over the United States. Right now, currently, we have 19 different states.
Wow.
And we have 1 Canadian, because he refused to come to America. He was like, "I will take the job as long as I don't have to come to America." And we were like, "Okay."
Huh, interesting. Jim, is that your background noise we're hearing?
It is, yes. I will turn my speaker off.
No, it's fine. That's fine. Kathleen, what about you? What's your mix?
At Framestore, we've got a pretty nice balance of both kind of temporary employees, as we refer to them, and full-time staff. You'll see a little bit more of that temporary employment model with kind of the commercial content that we do, since those projects come in and out of our facility relatively quickly. With features, you do have more of what they refer to as contracts that might get renewed regularly, but you're not necessarily always a staff member indefinitely, if that makes sense. It's not at will, because it's just different regions. Here in the US, all of our staff are at will. At will employment just means you can leave at any time or be let go at any time, just so you know.
When you say contract, are they payroll employees, or are
yeah,
they?
so we use the term temporary employee so that it's understood they're still considered an employee of Framestore. So it's not a 1099 independent contractor type agreement. We do shy away from those, especially in the US. There's certain circumstances where it might make sense if there's a very specialized position or a consultant we might need for a particular project. But for the most part, we're going to be looking at temporary employees, which would still be considered W-2, W-4, fill out a W-4, get a W-2 at the end of the year. So we've got a pretty even balance. I'd say I've noticed in the last few years, perhaps as my roles evolved, but I think also just in climate these days, we are focusing a little bit more on staff employment and not as heavily on freelance. We have really been trying to further grow that core staff team to help us better establish the focus of the content that we're working on, knowing the talent that we'll have, because the freelance market can be very unpredictable. You might have this core group that you really like to work with, but on the time that you need them, they're not available, and it's that whole back and forth. So we have kind of been making a slight shift, but I still think it'll always be a part of the business model within Framestore and in visual effects in general, especially advertisement, to have that freelance need, because they're often those very specific skill sets that are harder for us to employ full time. Think like storyboard artists that Deb might use more frequently than we do, because we're not always needing to do storyboards for our projects. So we'll just bring those folks in for the couple of weeks that we need them. Same if we ever have a project that might do like a 2D animation, like I'm not going to be able to keep that person busy a full year round, so we'll just hire them for when that project comes up. So that's kind of our balance at the moment between staff and freelance.
It makes sense. I mean, I would assume that those, since you're not producing your own intellectual property most of the time, that you have to move with what the clients want.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
And you can't always predict, what that workflow is going to be like, how much there's going to be, right? Did I ask everybody the same question? Yeah, I think so. Okay. So how do you find people? Jim, you touched on that a little bit. How do you find people?
Well, there's multiple different ways. LinkedIn is what everybody uses. I find LinkedIn very interesting, and sometimes like 10 years ago, it was great, but slowly over the years, they've slowed down on their ability to like keep up with the technology, and they have a tendency of freezing up. So now you have to buy accessory tools. So I use Intello on top of that for extra search ability. I'm a true believer in networking, but as over the last couple of years, because we've all been kind of chained up in our houses, and networking groups and conventions, my favorite thing in the whole wide world, have been a no-go. This will be our first time going back to a convention. So I'm looking forward to it and afraid of it all at the same time. I'm a firm believer that you always sell yourself as the best, and listen to other people when they tell you it's not. Be out there, make sure that you always submit your best, period. Dot and dot, 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 dot. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm hopefully this year we'll be about to be able to be outside again. So hopefully.
Right. Do you use ArtStation or any of those other platforms?
What's funny is ArtStation's fine if I need artists, but what the best part about being a small game company is you talk to your developers and go, hey, I need 5 of these. And they're like, oh, I have a friend.
Yeah.
I know somebody.
Sure.
And honestly, all right, I'll give you an example. I have one of my technical artists. He just redid his bathroom with all of his money that he made off of giving us candidates.
Oh.
Yeah, his wife is very happy with him right now.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so he got like, I think 15 grand in reimbursement. So
nice.
Yeah.
Deb, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously sourcing is a huge part of, I think, any of our roles in this industry. So definitely just echoing what Jim said in terms of just making sure you're out there and that you're present in, whether it's a website, it's an ArtStation, it's Blogspot, whatever it is, that it's presented well, and that when we do find you, it's not locked up under password protected, something that I can't find any of your work. Like I went to someone's site the other day and it was just completely password protected. So I was like, okay, I can't see anything here. So there has to be some stuff that doesn't have to be under password protected. Obviously there's some stuff that does, but you have to be able to have some amount of artwork to show that isn't password protected. But yeah, I mean, you can go down rabbit holes in terms of searching for people. So whether you start on LinkedIn or you go to, is it Blogspot that I'm thinking of? The one where like people list their friends on the side. And so then you just start going down their friends. And so it's always good to like have your connections or people that you inspire or are inspired by, or I do that on Instagram too, right? Like I'll go to one person and then I'll start looking through people they're following or who are following them, because usually they're the same types of people. And so we just kind of go deep down rabbit holes that way. Sometimes we look at credit lists and try to see, what films came out recently or projects came out recently that we might want to look and touch base with people that might be rolling off of projects, things like that. So, so many different ways of just trying to
What do you
uncover.
what do you do with the people that just send you, that just, just say, hey, I'm here and I can do this. How do you
Oh
manage?
yeah, I mean, if people apply, that's great. Sometimes
If they
it depends
apply.
on the role, right? Like if it's an intern role or a junior level role, online applications are great. And then the senior level people tend to not apply as much online, right? So they're gonna by the time they're senior level people, they know how to connect in this industry and they know how to get to one of us, right? Like this industry is so small that pretty much we're all connected by like one other person. So by the time you've spent at least 5 to 10 years in this industry, you know how to directly connect to someone by just asking a friend of a friend or finding another recruiter that might help you connect in. So a lot of times the more senior level roles I'd say that we're looking for are either more sourced or from us looking for people, or they're coming in because we've met them or someone else knows them and or they tried to find us themselves, versus like a true application. But I'd say I love the junior level applicants because there's so many people that come forward and even if someone doesn't get the role right then, we're looking at people in terms of potential and trying to keep an eye on people in case there's another opening later or something else. And so constantly trying to kind of balance that, like, yes, I had one job here, but I know later on I might be able to go back to that group of people that applied for that job and go back to see where those people are at. So
Thank you. Kathleen?
I mean, Jim and Deb stole all the good answers, but
So let me spin it a little bit, and that is, I know that I have a lot of pet peeves about people's LinkedIn profiles, and I know we have some people on here who may not have the best profiles. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, when you're using these tools, what works for you.
Oh, sure. I mean, for LinkedIn, having a filled out profile is super beneficial. I think a lot of people have started to treat it as their resume these days, which I think is fine to kind of have both if you don't mind. But I know that we do, as everyone said, at Framestore, we do a lot of our sourcing from LinkedIn, and I will just extract the PDF from the LinkedIn profile and use that as their resume when I present it to our hiring managers. So as much information as you can include in that is beneficial. So actually explaining what your role was, or maybe some of the projects you worked on. Within that, having links to your websites is super helpful, because then I don't have to like Google it and try to figure it out. So having that on that contact information, understandable if you might not want to put your email out there if you prefer, but if you really are trying to get a job, just put your email out there, have a separate email address that's just for job opportunities, that kind of thing, so that it's easier for us to contact you, because if you want to work, we want to contact you. I personally like to manage most of my communication through my Framestore email account as opposed to doing it in LinkedIn, because then that just means I have 2 inboxes that I have to manage.
Yes.
So that's why it's nice when people actually list their email, so I don't have to contact them direct through LinkedIn, but we do a bit of both. I think advising on like a decent photograph obviously is really smart. Nothing too unprofessional, I guess, is advisable. Just think what you would want your mom and grandma to see, kind of thing, like just something that's tasteful and not too out of this world. But I also don't mind those that have a little bit of creativity and show themselves in their personality through what they have in terms of an image on there. This is a pretty fun industry in general. We're a lot of creatives, so it's not like you need to be in your like headshot suit and tie type of image, but something that's clear and easy to kind of communicate who you are. I think those are, the thing I've started to really like about LinkedIn is how they now have the option of pronouncing your name, which I think is really fantastic. And I found that super helpful in situations where I don't know what it is. And I always do my best to guess, but I think that's a pretty cool feature. So worth using. I'm glad that they offer the option to include your pronouns, and I encourage people doing that if they feel inclined. All of that type of stuff I think is really nice about LinkedIn. I will say my biggest pet peeve isn't really LinkedIn related, and I think it's kind of a standard as far as job applications are concerned, but I absolutely hate when people submit a Word doc for their resume. Has to be a PDF. I will refuse. I will
Yeah, I mean, it
potentially
just-
reject you immediately if you send me a Word doc. So that's one suggestion I have. Make sure you make a PDF when you submit your applications into
We
any of
all-
those
yeah.
online.
We all have
Oh.
our tricks. When I was recruiting for support staff, I always put in the pitch, please send me an email telling me why you are right for this position, and don't attach your resume, please, embed it in the body of the email. So then I get 5,000 emails that say, here's my resume, I'm interested in your job, click. I mean,
Yeah.
that just like, you can't, these are detailed jobs. You can't read the description and do what I've asked you to do, then I don't want you.
Yeah.
The other thing that younger people tend to do, students and new entrants, is they don't want to use their picture. They'll use a caricature or no picture at all. And they set up a separate email address for LinkedIn stuff, which they never respond to, or they don't respond to their LinkedIn email. It's like, so a lot of times when I'm trying to track someone down, if they have a website, I'll go to, and if they have an email address in their LinkedIn, then I'll go and look at their website, and often that's a different email. And I always use the email that's on their website because I'm assuming that that is probably more current. The other thing with websites are those stupid contact forms.
I was just going to say, I hate those too.
Our students all have to have, our seniors all have to build LinkedIn profiles. And the first thing I tell them is, I don't care if whatever you're using, your Squarespace or whatever, just gives that to you. You put a live link in, because when I come across one of those, I don't fill it up. I mean, I can't be bothered. I want to click on something. And, yeah, Jim, you had something you wanted to say about that?
On links. All right. I know every recruiter in my industry, pretty much. Some of the recruiters will have, like, if they open up a website and it's a dead link, that's an instant rejection. Instant rejection. I will be nice and have up to 2. And be like, all right, usually the first one, sometimes it just happens, but sometimes you have to have other people QA your website, QA your stuff. Don't do it yourself. Have other people go and check it to make sure all your stuff actually works.
And is spelled correctly. And
I was just
Yes.
going to say.
Again, particularly we have a lot of international people in the US, and I always say, look, have a native English speaker look at your stuff. I used to be a proofreader, and I can't proofread my own work because you know what you meant to say. So, and those kind of little details, or I go to somebody's website and the reel is from 2014. It's like, please. Or there's nothing new. Their resume stops 3 years ago. People have a tendency to sort of get somewhere and like settle in and then forget that, think they're just going to be there forever. And you really have to keep your stuff up to date, right? Jim, Deb, feel free to just jump in because, the way people market themselves, they're just not thinking.
Game developers are notorious for it, especially when you get into the senior levels. They get very comfy in their lives and their lifestyles, or they have a tendency of going, I made that game, people know who I am. And you're like, you know what, but all of your stuff is super dated from like 5-6 years ago. And then when they say hypothetically they get laid off or fired, because our industries are all notorious for that, then they're like, what do I do? You're like, you had 5 years to keep your stuff updated. You could have been out there making friends, but instead you wanted to be an arrogant putz and, not try to keep up with everybody. So sometimes people get what they deserve. I hate to say that, but it's true. always update your stuff. Be friendly with other people. That's the key to working in our industries.
And a lot of
all
people,
of our industries.
a lot of people just, they don't want to do that. They're like, I just want to do my art. Well, yeah, well, you're going to have to do it in your mother's basement. You know, you just have to force yourself. Again, in our senior seminar, we require both semesters, it's a 1-year program. They have to go to industry events. Now that we've been, you know, in pandemic, they have to go to 3 online industry events, and they have to do informational interviews. And that has been a requirement of the class since we started. And our first graduating class was 2000. And it's always been, I sort of think about what your things were by what method people show stuff. You know, when we first started, people's senior projects and their senior reels were on video cassettes, elaborate, you know, boxes for them, and, you know, fancy stuff. And then there was like 5 minutes of DVD, and then it went on all online. And it's so easy. You know, I mean, at Otis, we have fashion design and product. We have kids making furniture. You know, they've got to have that done, where our students, they can redo their website at the senior exhibition and add things. I mean, it's so simple. And it's very frustrating when you come across stuff where people just don't bother, or they assume, like Jim said, oh, you know, or I've been around so long, everybody knows who I am, you know, someone will come and recruit me. Not necessarily.
I'll give you, I've been laid off. Everybody in our industry has been laid off at some point.
Sure.
Sorry. And most, I'm going to say most of my jobs that I've gotten, I've, you know, friends that I've worked with, different companies that are like, oh, remember that time you were really cool to me? I'm like, yeah. Do you need a job? Yes, I do. And a lot of that is like that.
Yeah.
And look, play well with the other kids. That's like one of my mantras. So
yeah, that's why I go to, and a lot of the things that I go to, like when I go to SIGGRAPH or GDC, I talk about, I'm going to wave my face around. I mean, that's the way I think of it, you know. And I find that I think the last time I went to the big SIGGRAPH, I think I went to 4 actual sessions, and the rest of the time just wandering around, have coffee, run into people in, you know, in coffee lines, or in the art show, things like that. That's all I do. I just schmooze.
And you bought a giraffe.
I did bring a giraffe. Some of you don't know about this, but yeah, we had a camel on campus a couple of years ago, and it was the coolest thing. And I got this wild idea that I wanted to do an animal drawing program at SIGGRAPH at the LA Convention Center. And I brought a giraffe.
I saw that giraffe. I was
Remember?
there.
Oh, you did?
Yep, I saw him. He was
I
there.
Instagrammed that
I
giraffe.
went there, I saw it too.
His name was Tiny. He was just a couple of years old, and they said that in a couple more months he wouldn't have fit through the door. And he was the sweetest thing. And you know, there were a bunch of people that got all upset, all looked like PETA people. Oh, you know, it's awful. The only thing that he was upset about was that he couldn't put his face in everybody's hands. You know, and we had to set this big buffer around him, and he was just so curious. And I remember at one point, Gary Gareths was doing, he's a wonderful artist in our animal draw. And Gary was sketching him, and he was outside the enclosure, and Tiny went over to the corner and he leaned his neck out as far as he could. And then he stuck his tongue out because he was fascinated by the silver binder clips. And that's when I discovered that giraffes have black tongues, so they don't get sunburned while they're eating, which was the coolest thing. So yeah, and I got SIGGRAPH to pay for it. I only had to pay the artist and the staff people who came. So yeah, it was really cool.
It was cool.
But then because all the animal rights people got all upset, And they never let me do it. I wanted to do it in Vancouver and they said I couldn't have a non-human. This is the way they describe it. We don't want you to have a non-human model.
Right.
Non-human model. I want to bring an animal in. No. Okay. So, but yeah, see, and that was, wow, that was a long time ago. That was a lot of fun. Okay. Well, thank you.
I just had one more thing to add to the marketing conversation of, oh, we lost Jim. Or maybe he just went off screen. Maybe he didn't. Anyway, I just wanted to add that from a junior level standpoint, I often see students leaving their work on from like their freshman year, and then they get to their senior year and their skill set has changed completely, and they have grown so much as an artist. And I just want to say it out loud here that just especially as a student, like always monitor what's on your website and start actually taking things off that aren't at the level at which you're at this point in your career. So if you feel like your freshman work is at the level that your senior level work is at, then great. But most of the time it's not. So most of the time you need to start monitoring yourself and ask your teachers, ask your friends, what should you keep? What should you at this point archive? And make sure that the stuff on your site is always fresh.
Yes, I tell them your website is not your mother's refrigerator door.
Yeah.
Not everything is precious.
I always tell them, don't trust your mother. Don't listen to what she has to say about your artwork. Listen to your professors.
Exactly. But also, people get really attached to something that they did because they worked really hard on it. And then they'll put it on their website, and like there's animation, and then there's motion design. Like, do you want to be a motion designer? No, but I worked really hard on that piece. I thought it turned out really well. Well, someone's going to see it and offer you a motion design job. Then what are you going to do? Like, don't put stuff on your website that you don't want to do.
Right.
I mean, it's just crazy. So what skills are you finding? Oh, Jim, you had something else you wanted to say.
Well, no, I was going to top that one off. The fact that people do that all the time. And I had a friend of mine who was really good at VFX and really good at environment art. And she kept putting it both in her site. And I said, you're not doing yourself any help at all. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you have to have two separate sites for this. Oh man, that's a lot of work. And I'm like, work is work.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
You want work, you got to make the efforts. And the thing is, like, everybody wants to make it as easy for themselves as possible. And I'm like, that's just not how it works, guys. You have to, if you want to do this, you have to have something separate. Period.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay, so what are you finding? Are you having positions that you're having a hard time finding? Yeah, Jim, what are you having a hard time finding?
Senior level technical artist.
And why is that?
Because there's multiple facets to that. There are some that are senior, really good at doing rigging and getting all the characters working and stuff. And then there's ones that are senior level technical artists for all the other stuff. And then they also fall into VFX, and then they fall into lighting, and in trying to find the right person to fill the right role sometimes takes way longer than it should. It took me 6 months to find a good technical artist the last time to fit our particular need. And honestly, it drove me crazy.
What about I mean, you mentioned some other fields. What about competition from other industries?
Oh yeah, we steal from each other constantly.
But even outside of entertainment?
Not very often. No, I don't take anybody from outside of games. Not ever. Maybe concept, because there are some concept artists that are that awesome that can go across multiple platforms, and they're fine with that. But they're also rock stars. I mean, just
Mm.
straight up rock stars.
Mm.
But most of the time, your discipline is your discipline.
Yeah.
Your industry is your industry.
What
Hopefully.
about you, Kathleen? What are you finding hard to get?
I could go on for a bit right now, but I'll try to be concise. So right now, I'd say one of the highest demand roles, and I'm hearing about this across the visual effects industry, is CG lighters. We need a lot of them. And I think that's kind of across the group. Compositing is also a pretty in-demand position at the moment. There's so much content being created right now. There's so many more services making original IP that they need the visual effects done for it. So it's a very busy time. It's an incredible time, really, and an unprecedented time in my short career of visual effects and the demand. It's really the artist market right now. They are able to kind of pick and choose. You see a lot more movement right now than I think I've ever seen before, as people are able to consider what's most important to them. So I think that's having an impact on all types of positions. We have noticed as well that we're starting to try to compete a little bit in the area of what might traditionally be game artists. So trying to persuade those individuals to come into the world of visual effects as there's more development with real time and virtual production, seeing how those skill sets can move over to us. It's a little bit of a different world. So it takes a little bit of effort and convincing to say, come see what it's like over in the filmmaking side of things. We're competing with tech companies a lot because they're starting to build their own in-house teams. So I'm experiencing that quite a bit. So, you know, I think it's a really fascinating time. It definitely is keeping me on my toes. It's keeping me very busy. It's making me have to be a bit more innovative in my approaches to how to find the right people. But it makes me also incredibly excited because it's great to see these individuals have this opportunity to say, I know this is what I want, and, you know, they deserve it, I think, you know, at a certain level. So that's quite exciting. But yeah, CG lighting, we're using Houdini. So anyone that wants to learn Houdini, they should absolutely learn Houdini. It's getting used in like everything now. We're even using it in some of our motion design work as well.
Yep.
So that I think
our classes in Houdini at Otis were started because students came to us and said,
yeah, good.
we want to learn this stuff. And so we just turned to our visual effects guy and said, learn it over the summer,
Right.
start teaching it in the fall.
Yeah, and Unreal is becoming
well, that's
very
one of the things that I
skill set.
is that it's being used in all these different segments, you know, that you know, on one hand, there's this sense of, you know, from an education standpoint where we know we want these sort of very well defined departments, and we're saying, but look, everything's mixing, you know, all these tools and all these skills are used across the industry. Deb, you know, I mean, you're in a very specific niche, but are you seeing that as well? Are you guys using things that you didn't use before? And you know,
I would say in my previous role, yes, I saw that.
Can you explain what your previous role was?
Yeah, I was the director of recruitment and talent development at Blue Sky. So I was there for the last 10 years prior to the layoff and shutdown of the studio.
Right. Yes, I know.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it was the same thing. Like Houdini was just coming in, and it was going to be a bigger part of the pipeline at that point. And so hearing like, and it's been a while because it's been a year since we left, but hearing Houdini come back up as like something that's growing in the pipeline, it was like, oh yeah, that was happening there as well. And so, yeah, I'd say definitely like I'm just really Nuke and Houdini, all those kind of back end tools, like knowing them and just being well versed, even if it's not your main discipline, I think is important to have the knowledge of what might be coming after you in the pipeline too. So from an education standpoint, like learning those like fundamentals and the background is, I think, super important for even your future movement, because you may start in lighting and then decide you want to be in compositing later on, or might want to move from effects to, you know, cloth effects or whatever everyone's calling character effects, depending on the company you're at. So anyway, I think there's a lot of transferable skill sets out there, and those tools can help transition.
Well,
someone.
certainly, Jim, in the game industry, certainly, Unreal and Unity.
Right.
But now, it's starting to move into other areas of the business. So are you finding
Oh,
where
yeah.
you're finding people, or where you're losing them to? That's
All the
affecting.
above. Our VFX people, it used to be just you needed X tool, and now you need X tool plus this other tool plus this other tool to finish your jobs. Things that used to be really like, oh, you could do everything on 3D Studio Max or Maya, but now you need, what was it called? Sorry, it is
Okay.
lost in my brain. But there are so many new tool sets out in a lot of companies. If say one of our junior talents don't understand something, we will train them up if need be.
Someone just said in the chat, in the panel chat, key shot.
Yeah. But no, they're in our tools. Like when I got into our industry, everybody still had their own engines. Everybody didn't understand anything that anybody else was doing, and now we've gotten to the point where it's like, why spend all this money building another engine or build all this technology when we can just go buy it from Unreal or we can buy it from Unity, and then find all these kids. I do call them kids because I'm an old fart, but you can find all these kids that because their colleges push them on Unreal or push them on Unity really hard, it's easier for us to source out and find them.
Mhm.
Because they're kind of not like, they're not 100% ready to go, but they're close enough.
Mhm. Yeah. Kathleen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No.
So it sounds to me like the pool of candidates is bigger, but there's still lots of challenges. Is that the way you're seeing it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody's fickle, especially seniors.
Senior talent or seniors in school?
Senior talent.
Okay.
When I got into games, nobody had families yet.
Yeah.
It was all kids running kids. And then all of a sudden, magically, they all discovered, oh my God, I'm going to have children. And then the whole industry changed from, let's see, I think 04 through 08, like it flipped a switch during that time. And everything changed overnight. And then we had so much tech change in a short amount of time. Well, in games, we change tech like every 6 months. We change it like toilet paper. It's crazy how we go through things. And then if we're not up to speed, Unreal 5, we have so many people on it trying to figure out how to make it work into our pipelines. And it is a crazy beast. And then a lot of the publishers are like, oh, we need all these Unreal 5 developers. There aren't any Unreal 5 developers out there yet. It's not even really being used by anything. And so that is what we keep coming up to is like, they want you to be on this particular tool. Well, there's a small handful of people that use that tool. Or they need you to be on this engine. Well, there's only a handful of people that actually know that engine.
Mhm.
So then you have to completely what should have been like a quick move into something new. It takes you 4 or 5 months to get everybody up to speed in a very short amount of time. And it's like, because we keep changing our technology.
Yeah, but I would imagine
Totally.
too, you also have to look at whether or not the investment in that new technology is worth enough.
Sometimes. Or you go find another company that is very well-rounded in that particular technology, and then you rent them for a few months. Yeah.
So what skills are you finding that otherwise talented people are missing? Deb, what do you
Yeah.
find? What, like usually, okay, so I have this list of like, and there's 3 things that are really important, and I'm getting 2 out of 3, different 2 out of 3.
Yeah. I would say entertainment value. So,
What do you mean?
there's fundamental skill sets, right? Like, let's just talk about like an animator per se. You have someone who actually just knows how to move a character across the screen, and can get their mechanics right. Great. But if they don't know how to act and bring entertainment to the scene, then they just fall flat, right? Then it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, like you can move the character just fine, but the person that stands out is the person that is making you emote in one way or another, whether it's a good, happy emotion or a sad emotion, whatever it is. But it's the same thing, like you could put it into lighting too, right? Like there's a cinematic value to what a lighter can bring to their shot. And so, yeah, someone can light something, make it look decent, and then someone can make it look like a beautiful painting that looks like it's standing on its own, right? And so I think that there is an entertainment value that people need to bring to their work that puts them at a level above other people. And I mean, you can see it in even student work, it doesn't have to be professional level work, but the people that really understand how to entertain and emote and bring emotion to people, I think are the ones that stand out above the rest.
Yeah. We talk about, we don't want to create risks, people that just move stuff,
Right.
So everything has to have some story behind it. What about you, Kathleen? What are you finding people are missing that are otherwise talented?
I mean, usually the thing that will pause us on a candidate that ticks all the boxes is probably more of like a good positive attitude and being a good collaborator. That you could have all of the right technical skills, artistic skills, but if you're a jerk to the rest of the team, you are rude to your producer or the coordinator, you don't know how to take the feedback when a client says they don't like the work, that's really going to be the showstopper for us that makes us not move forward. I think there is that inherent creativity that you want to see come through in individuals' portfolios as well, because there is a stark difference between those that can just follow direction, which is obviously an important part of working in this industry as well, because especially at the beginning, you're not going to be given a lot of creative freedom, but it's having, as Deb was saying, that little spark of like, oh, maybe if I tried this, it'll really change how this all looks, instead of just doing exactly as you're told and having your own creative flair. That again is a unique trait that you're not going to find in every candidate, that really does kind of distinguish someone from the rare gem, from the, yes, this person can do the job, I'm not worried. But I also I love those people that can just do the job, and that that you can bring out that shine as you get them into your team and you polish them, and they become even a bigger gem than maybe the one that felt so obvious from the beginning. And that's kind of why I love what I do, is when we find those individuals, and those individuals are the ones that have the good attitude. So it's like, those are the ones we're going to want to invest in, and that make it all worthwhile. So, I'm not saying I'm encountering a lot of rude people, but just if I had to say the thing that makes people less attractive to hire are usually those types of qualities.
The late great Sandy Skordos from Sony Pictures Imageworks, who I think was the first recruiter I met, used to say, can they do the job? Will they do the job? And will they fit in?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, your reel and your resume are going to tell me the first one. Some light conversation is going to tell me the second one, but I'm going to sit across the table from you, or I'm going to watch you in a group interview and talk to other people. I never pay any attention to anybody's references. I look at their resume and say, oh, you worked for this person I know, and this person I know, and this person I know, and I'm going to call them. Because you're just going to put your mother on your reference. Like, people who just love you to pieces, or they don't bother to check. That's the other thing. I mean, depending on the company, there are certain companies, if you call a person at work at Disney for a reference, they will say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. So before you put somebody on your resume as a reference, and please don't say, references, as requested. Like, just leave that off. Have a separate sheet that has your references on it. Like, of course you're going to have references if I request them, but know also that I'm not going to necessarily pay attention to, because we've all been in this business long enough and we know people, and that's who we want to talk to. A million years ago, I mean, I'm the oldest person in this room. I've been in the business 47 years. But before that, I even had a small career, and I worked for the Secret Service. And that's how I learned, because I gave them a list of references where they just knew each other. And I knew they were going to ask them, who else can we talk to? And they would refer each other, though. They didn't do that. No. They found faculty and all sorts of people. So, and that's what we do. We want to talk to people that really know you. And we want to talk to them when they're able to speak to you. So if you have a reference you want to use, tell them. A lot of people don't even bother to tell somebody that they've listed them as a reference, and then ask them, what's the best way to reach you? Like, don't call me at work, call me at home, or don't call me at all. Here's my personal email address. But let them know. So many people don't bother telling their references. I mean, I've had faculty list me as a reference and not tell me. I'm like, okay, well, nice to hear from, this other college that you're applying to. Sure wish I'd known, that would help, and so you need to tell people stuff. Plus, you tell them and say, hey, I'm updating everything. I'm about to look for another job. Do you know anybody? I mean, your good references will know other people. So what's the best way for someone to get your attention and get you to interview and hire them? Kathleen, let's start with you.
The best way is to actually apply on our website, because that really helps me a lot, because then I don't have to input your information through our database. So I do strongly encourage, for Framestore in particular, applying to an open role that we have is a good way to get your name in front of me, because I do actually go through all of those applications and look through them. The next is probably through LinkedIn. As much as I said, my LinkedIn inbox can be a bit of a disaster zone. It is an effective way to make that initial contact. And again, it's gonna be more how you present yourself through that application. That's really gonna spark my interest, because I do get quite a few unsolicited messages on LinkedIn to be like, what do you think of my reel? And as much as I wish I could do that all day long, I don't have time to give everybody feedback and detailed response to their work. So LinkedIn's a good way to get connected, but kind of follow through with actually looking at what opportunities we have. Doing your research, don't come to me to ask me like, what job do you have for me? Like, look at what we have open and what you might fit. And if you don't see the role that you want available at Framestore, at that time, that's when you can send the message that just says, I'm really excited about the opportunity of working with you, but I see you're not hiring animators right now, but I'm an animator, kind of thing. We always have kind of freelance requisitions open on our website for the US offices. So you can always register your details through one of those avenues so that you're in our database, because it really is the first port of call. I go through this gigantic database of people that have applied to Framestore over the last maybe 10 years. We have that historical, if they haven't asked to be removed from our database, but we have that kind of long historical context of people that have wanted to work with us previously. And so we do try to go through those options before we start kind of looking outside of that, but that's the best way to get in touch with us.
Jim, what's the best way for people to get your attention?
Come to one of my networking groups. I have a programmer. He is from USC. He saw me speak at USC when I was with Santa Monica Studios, and he kept saying, "One day I'm going to work for you." And I'm like, "Street recruiter, you don't want to just work for me." I'm all, "You're a pretty smart kid. Be a programmer. Go, work at whatever." A week ago, he showed up at my networking group and he goes, "Do you know who I am?" And I'm like, "I do know who you are." And I'm all, "You're the most persistent human being I've ever met." And I have a lot of like love and faith in people that are persistent, especially if he's sweethearted and he's, he just wants to, be a part of something bigger than himself. I kind of always had a soft spot for that kind of stuff.
What about you, Deb? How do people get your attention?
Say persistence for sure. 'Cause sometimes, yeah, like sometimes it's just hard to respond to everyone, and I may not get to someone when they, connect with me on the first time on LinkedIn, as much as I want to and try to. But I'd say timing is everything, persistence. But also, I mean, it stinks because we haven't been out in the industry in 2 years, right? But being present at every event you can possibly go to. I know it's hard and it's a lot of money depending on, where you're located. But it's kind of like the more I see someone, the more, it's easier to remember who they are, and you see their portfolio again and again. And, and then they follow up with an email. And so you kind of start to get to remember people that way and be like, "Oh yeah, I've seen this person grow through the years," and like I always talk about how important these like long-term relationships are in our industry, because a lot of times like we meet someone when they're maybe a sophomore in school or maybe a CTN or a CGRAPH for the first time, and we don't hire them that year for whatever reason. We didn't have something open, they were too junior, whatever it was that we didn't hire them that year, but then we saw them again, and then we saw them again, and then we talked to them again. And so there's a lot of times where it's like 5 years later, we hire someone, and it's those people that you can see are growing in their work, and are doing good work, and then who are consistent and not too annoying.
Can I add to that? It's just with that persistence, I would hope they're showing you new work throughout.
Right. Yes.
There's
exactly.
a difference between
yes.
constantly emailing to just be like, "What's going on?" But it's like, if you're actually updating your portfolio, that's what I appreciate, because that's key. That's a big difference between someone that will be annoying versus someone that you're like, "Wow, look how they've really continued to take the feedback that we might have given them in a portfolio review or in an informational meeting or whatever, and they've made these updates and that kind of thing." Because that's, I think, is quite a critical difference.
They just had another gig and have some cool work that they want to show you, that they're proud of,
Yeah, like I remember meeting this one at the time. He was a kid at college. I forgot if I met him at CTN first. I think I met him at CTN first, and I gave him some advice. Then I saw him later that year at his school, and I could see he took some of that advice and gave him a little bit more advice. And then by the time it came to applying for our internship, he had like fully listened and put extra pieces on that like really helped kind of shape his animation reel. And he ended up getting our animation internship and has now moved on to bigger, better things. And solid senior person in the industry at this point. So yeah.
I know we have people in our audience that are all over the map in terms of their experience. And we've been talking about various opportunities to meet people that they may not be familiar with. So for example, Deb, you just mentioned CTN several times. I know what CTN is, but why don't you talk a little bit about CTN and any other events, or how people find the places they should go and be visible in?
Yeah, sure. So CTN is the Creative Talent Network Expo, which is usually the weekend before Thanksgiving in Burbank, California. There's also Lightbox, which is 2 or 3 years old now, in September. So those are 2 LA-based, specifically events that are happening year-round, or not year-round, but happening yearly. And hope that at this point, this coming year, will be live again. SIGGRAPH obviously is another big one. Ottawa in Canada, that's another big event where, we've met a lot of talent there. And then in Europe, right, there's FMX, and then there's in Stuttgart, Germany in May, and then there's Annecy, which is more of a festival, but it's still, especially for, on the, pre-production talent, and a place to go for pre-production. So there's so many events worldwide, and I'm missing a ton of them. There's few in Italy, and just there's so many different places too. And then SIGGRAPH, obviously, wherever SIGGRAPH is for the year, right, in Vancouver this coming year. Yeah. So there's just so many different events, and whether you go to 1 or 2 a year, especially, as a student, a lot of these events have student volunteer opportunities. And so whether they give you discounted rates or even pay for your hotel rooms, whatever it is, there's usually some incentive and some cheaper way of getting there as a student and a student volunteer. So, I think those are only the ones I can think of off the top of my head. I think the major larger ones, but if there's anything, there's game, right? I'm missing all the game.
I'm going to talk about game events that you are aware of, and how people find these big events, small events. Like, how would somebody find out about your drinking rock, or whatever it's called? Rock and Dev.
Oh, Rock and Dev.
Yeah.
I put it up all over LinkedIn. I figure it's the broadest tool that we have. So I learned a great way to recruit without actually having to buy any recruiting tools is you go to everybody's groups and you become friends with all their groups. And then you post all your job postings on their groups, and you get to a couple 100,000 different people, and you don't have to spend a dime. You just have to spend the time, getting your posts out.
Mm-hmm.
Every month, I the week before Rock and Brew, I usually post around to everybody's groups and say, hey, just come and hang out. It's only 2 hours long.
So what groups? What groups are you talking about?
Mostly it's all game development. Mm-hmm. I go after the VFX people, the producer groups, all the art groups, all the programmer groups. I get probably 1 programmer a month, and then I get a lot of animators and a lot of tech artists.
Mm-hmm.
But they all work for different groups, and I don't steal talent from that group, because we're all different game companies that come together, and as long as they don't steal from me, I don't steal from them. So you build a kind of a rapport that way with other recruiters. Like I have about a handful of recruiters that I don't take people from their studios. It's just one of those things. It's a, what do they call it, a gentleman's handshake or whatever they call it.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to abide, because there'll be a time where they'll need me or I'll need them, and it's always better to be play well with the other kids. So
besides the Game Developers Conference, are there any other major
SIGGRAPH? There's PAX, but that one's a commercial group, but there's still a lot of game developers there. PAX, Penny Arcade Expo.
Oh.
And there's like 4 or 5 of them now. There's one in Texas. The big one is in Seattle, and that one is a hoot. The whole city's behind that one. So when you get there, it's like, how Comic-Con is down in San Diego, where the whole city is kind of wrapped around Comic-Con. PAX is like that up in Seattle. Like they all know that week is going to be filled with 100,000 nerds in full regalia.
But are those good places to recruit?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. Because look, there are some people there that are there as just guests, but they run into you and they're like, "You're Jim Rivers, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Hey, there's lots of people that'd like to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay." And next thing you know, you're at a restaurant with a bunch of developers that were just up there having fun with their friends, but now all of a sudden they all need jobs.
Hmm.
So I've recruited plenty out of stuff like that.
What about you, Kathleen? Where do you go? What events, do you have events that you like?
Is really good at answering these questions ahead of me. But the other thing I was going to
I'll ask you
potentially,
first.
no, it's really okay. But I was just going to suggest potentially to people to follow the companies that they know they want to work for, because they often host their own smaller networking events themselves, and they'll advertise those on like their LinkedIns or Twitters or Instagrams. So that's something that I've noticed. You'll see Framestore, the Mill, Technicolor, Creative Group, they'll, put stuff out that they host, and most of the time those types of events are free. So they're not that you have to do those massive investments for tickets to major expos. Just for more of these virtual type of events. And sometimes you'll even see them do in-person mixers. That's something they used to do. Maybe we'll all start doing that again. But I have noticed that since the kind of pandemic, I've noticed a lot more companies kind of trying to do those kind of virtual, networking options. So it's always smart to kind of follow those studios that you may want to work for, or that are at least adjacent to other companies you might want to work for, because again, you'll just meet people in those environments. I would also promote for the visual effects in gaming and animation industries, there's an organization that I'm a part of called Access VFX, which is really trying to do some more with outreach and, bringing people together. It's a cooperative between a bunch of different studios within the industry. So as Jim was saying, it's where we all actually come together to help each other. It's not about competing for the best talent. It's about us giving talent options and showing them what kind of opportunities there may be, and really promoting the idea of access, opportunity, inclusion, diversity within the industries. So they're starting to do a little bit more we're trying to start doing more with events and kind of online options, as well as hosting things hopefully in person here again pretty soon around the globe. So other organizations that are worth following. And I know there's quite a few kind of diversity, inclusion and equity groups out there that are, worth following. There's like Rise Up Animation, there's the Animation Project, there's Women in Animation. So like all those types of organizations are really good to pay attention to, to find other
Latinx animation. Yeah. There's a lot of those kind of groups.
And they're always trying to do these types of events. So you'll always be able to network and meet people in those scenarios as well.
And the big conferences, like SIGGRAPH, always have a lot of extra events around them, either pre-events that are formal or parties. I've been to a couple of great Framestore parties. I miss those SIGGRAPH parties. That's the best thing.
Too.
So do I.
Well, you just host your own party once a month. We need to do that. All right, let's see.
Actually, you would laugh. I switched. Our old bar closed.
Yes, I know.
And it made me want to cry. It brought a tear.
Dubliner.
But this new one closes at like 9:30, and everybody's like, "Why did you choose this place?" And I'm like, "Because I don't want you guys getting DUIs. I don't want you to be dangerous. I want you to interact with each other, not drink unconsciousness,
Mm-hmm.
And it actually is working out quite well. That, and they always bring all of their magic cards. So we have one table that's about 15 feet long, and it's just magic going all the way across.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, here's another one of my favorite questions, which is where the field is headed. So what new jobs are being added and what old jobs are going away? Kathleen, I'll start with you.
I might have touched upon this a little bit, but in the visual effects industry, working with that real-time kind of content is really what's changing. And we're seeing that as a growing position, and one that I don't think is going anywhere as we continue to evolve our approach into how we make what we do. Roles that are going away, it's kind of sad, but the runner position is really the position I've noticed we don't have the way that we used to, because we're not in the studio as much. We still have some runners, but it's not to the scale. You know, we used to have like 10 in each office, and now we've got maybe 2. So that's actually something I've noticed. Some of that client service type of positions within visual effects studios is what I've seen vanish as people are moving more into these hybrid work models, and there's a little less client attendance. But yeah, I think that's my contribution.
Yeah, we don't have mail cards anymore, you know.
Right? Yeah.
Somebody pushes around. We don't even have a mail slot anymore.
Yeah.
You know, where people used to deliver things in those Swiss cheese envelopes, and somebody pushed that thing around all day to all the different offices. Jim, what about you? What new jobs are coming? What old jobs are going away?
There are no jobs going away. Game developers just keep adding more and more and more. When I got into games, there was 3 designer position. There was designer, level designer, and narrative designer. Now there's like 15 different positions for designer. We get rid of nothing. We just keep stacking things on top of
Is that
stuff.
because the games get more complex, the availability, the technology allows a lot more stuff?
All right, I'll give you a kind of a really interesting. I came from Santa Monica studio where we made God of War. We won a game of the year, blah, blah, blah. There was 400 developers making one game. I work in a studio now that has 130 people, and we're making 4 games. Because they make, you get a little itty bitty piece of something at a big, huge, gigantic studio, but at like a small studio like we have, everybody gets a piece of the pie. And if you have multiple facets or multiple disciplines under your belt, everything is great and hunky-dory with us. So nothing goes away. Everything is something. And if you know something that somebody else doesn't know, guess what? You get another umbrella in your drink. So yeah, it will always keep going this way with games.
What about with you, Deb? Anything new? Anything going away?
I don't know about new per se, but in this, I don't want to. I feel bad even like saying it because I don't know where it's going to go, but with theatrical releases changing the way they've changed and hopefully still coming out, I do wonder where the stereo departments will end up in feature world, right? Like there's VR and AR and other areas, even compositing, where that skill set could be transferred. But how many studios are going to continue to create stereoscopic films? I don't know, right? Like, I think that's probably a good question on a lot of people's minds, especially after this pandemic. You know, I think it was on the minds prior to the pandemic, and now post-pandemic, I wonder where that discipline will end up in the next 5 years.
It's interesting. And you all have touched a little bit on immersive. I'm particularly interested with Kathleen and Deb, kind of where you see your corner of the business going with regards to those kinds of things. Kathleen, because you touched on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of different kind of R&D within Framestore, both in, you know, those what we call our traditional immersive department, which would be doing more VR, AR, MR, XR type experiences, and that's continuing to grow. That landscape has kind of evolved a lot and kind of shifted focus over the years. VR was really hot for a minute, and now it got more kind of AR focus, and then it became very much location, kind of mixed reality experiences. And then that really got halted once no one could go anywhere anymore, and now it's kind of coming back. So that I think is going to continue to be this ebb and flow as they figure out really what the consumers are most engaged with. I think AR is really going to remain fairly prevalent as it's so accessible on mobile devices that everyone tends to have. So I think we'll always kind of be in that space a little. And I do think there is an interest in these mixed reality location-based experiences. Those are obviously an investment if you want to do a permanent structure. And so they take a little bit longer to develop, but I see that still having a presence. And then when it comes to kind of applications in more of our traditional workflows, the idea of introducing virtual production is really expanding. It's something that I think you've seen in some of the most obvious cases of like the Mandalorian series, but how that was successful, and even with like Lion King did a lot with that film. You're seeing it even more, starting to use it even in commercial experience, like commercial projects. So I think that's going to continue to expand as clients are getting more comfortable with that idea, realizing that the cost up front might end up saving them more money down the line to kind of invest in the idea of virtual production. So I do think that's an application that won't really change, as it'll just make the review process a bit more seamless for our teams and for our clients. So I definitely see it being incorporated in more and more of what we do.
What about you, Deb?
Well, I think Kathleen really answered that well for me too. Yeah, it's interesting. I think just depending on the studio, and kind of the backing that they have for experimentation determines how much they have room for that and for experimenting in it, because you could see some studios have gone much further in it, and then other studios have done very little. And then you have, Google and Amazon chiming in terms of them coming into that space and hiring, feature animation artists to come over and experiment and create shorts and stuff. But I feel like the pandemic just put a halt on like all of it. And so it's interesting to see like, okay, now that we're hopefully coming out of this, like, where is all of that going? And is it going to continue to grow, or is it going to just kind of fade away? Or it seems most applicable in the game world than in feature entertainment per se, but there's shorts, right? And I feel like people can hang on to the goggles for short, but I don't know that it can make its way into feature. I don't know if I see people sitting there for an hour and a half with a headset on, right? Part of watching a feature, especially in a theatrical experience, is watching it with the people next to you. So I think
I miss that so much.
Yeah, I know. Right?
I'm a movie person. I love to go to the movie theater.
I know.
Sit in the dark room and not be distracted by my laundry, my dog, my kitchen, any of those things. It's just immerse myself in whatever it is I'm watching. And I do miss it. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting pickier. It's like, well, do I want to leave my house to go and see this? Is it worth it? Now
you have choice, right? Now you have more choice.
And I think particularly depending on what kind of films you like, I'm given the business I'm in, I'm not a big blockbuster person. I like character-driven dramas. Those work pretty well on TV. So
it's funny because as a mother of young children, I am waiting for the day that I feel comfortable bringing them to the theater for the first time, right? Like I feel like that's everyone's like first thing is like getting that theater experience. And so I'm hoping that the world starts to get better and we can re-engage in the theater experience.
Well, it's 8:00. Actually, it's 8:01. And I did tell people that we would start taking questions. So there's some in the chat, which I will share. Somebody says, what steps can someone just out of college with an interactive media degree take in order to obtain a career in video game development? So let's have Jim go for that.
All right. I'm terrible, and please, Kathleen, do not slay me for this.
I would never slay.
Over the years, I have learned that I don't care what degree you have. I really don't. It's your work that will show me, impress me. I have hired people. I hired a game developer who went to an agricultural college, and he worked on tools for the tractors. He worked on the programming for the tractors, and he was so good at programming that he's like, I don't want to be a farmer, and worked his way up to something else.
Mhm.
I had a bunch of kids that worked at Disneyland doing people's sketches out in front of a park. And one guy, he didn't even have a degree in anything. He barely got out of high school, and he's one of the best artists I've ever known. You know, it's I always hate saying this, but sometimes it's right place, right time. You know,
Is there a specific way to go after a career in game development?
Yes, there is. Knowing what you are and who you are. If you're a shooter fan and you like shooter type games, focus all of your stuff, all of your artwork, all of whatever that you have. Find the studios that you are actively really into, and you make work dedicated to them. It sounds harder. It actually is actually much harder than it sounds, because now you have art directors that are looking for it, and they expect you to, when you submit your work to them, they expect you to be as good as them. And I know that sounds horrible and disgusting, but the best way I can say it is study the games that you like, and then look at your reels and any artwork that you have. If your work doesn't look as good as the game that you play, then you have to work harder. And we don't say no to good talent. I can tell you that. All my fellow recruiters here will also say the same thing. If you're an absolute awesome developer, we won't say no to you. Okay, but you have to put in the work. And if your work is blasé at best, then you won't get where you want to be. You have to put the effort in. That's all I can say. And if you do, we will look at it. Me and my fellow recruiter Maria, we go through everything. And if you're bad, you're just bad. That's not our problem. That's your problem. So make sure that you put forth every bit of the effort. And if you see, like, everybody has Pinterest, right? Raise your hand. Everybody. Pinterest has every concept art thing that you could imagine for every video game under the sun. And if you can't get work to make your work look like their work, then you have to work harder. End of story. Did that answer the question?
I don't know, but
Okay.
I think so. We have a couple other questions about game development. I think you've covered it all. One of our students, our former students, Mo Medved, when and how is it appropriate to reach out to recruiter directly? And how else would you prefer to hear from us if not through application? And I'm gonna ask Kathleen that, because she was the one that said, just apply. So if people don't want to apply, then what do they do? If they don't,
Well,
say they
why
go
don't they want to apply?
Oh, well,
Why do they want to talk to you if they don't want to apply?
okay, so does it have to be a specific opening?
No, so like I was saying, I do have these kind of, just in Framestore terms specifically, we do have these always open kind of freelance positions that you can at least get your content kind of submitted to us so that we can keep track of you in our database. Beyond that, I'd say, it's through LinkedIn. I can't promise you I'll respond, I guess is all I'll say. I will accept your invitation. If you send me a message, I'll try. I sometimes give myself a day, a month where I just kind of try to go through all of my like LinkedIn messages and follow up with people. A lot of the messages are, like I said, people asking me to give them feedback on the reel, which I don't have time to do that because I'm doing that with all the people that actually applied through the website for the roles that we're hiring for. So you're very welcome to reach out. I'm never bothered by an initial contact. It's more that kind of persisting with continuing to check in with me if I haven't followed up and you have nothing new to say beyond what you said in your first message, that it's like, slow down. You don't need to check in with me every week to see if I saw your email. You know, because if I have an opportunity that's the right fit for you, I will very quickly respond. If you send me content that isn't really a fit for what we do at Framestore or isn't a fit for any of the openings I have in the short term, I'm probably going to put it at the lower end of my priority list, just because I've got a lot on my plate. So LinkedIn is still a good route to go. There's never any harm in connecting with me. I will happily make that connection. Just don't keep your expectations in check as to how interactive we might be initially. You know, there's no harm in sending the message, but don't assume that I'm going to get back to you immediately, if at all, honestly, which I hate to admit.
Yeah,
but
that's
real.
I'm paraphrasing or sort of expanding a question from Justin Morales, who says, those who want to freelance, how do we market ourselves? And is there a different way to market yourself if you want to just freelance or if you want to be on staff, or is it all the same?
I think it's all the same.
Yeah, it's roughly the same. I think if you really want to only freelance, write freelance on what you do. Just say, I'm a freelance so-and-so animator, motion graphics designer, whatever. And that kind of sends the message that you're really only interested in short-term agreements as opposed to staff opportunities, and don't apply to staff jobs. Just, you know, go for the freelance positions.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's see. Some of these are very similar. So we talked a lot about how we start meeting and networking with people. Is there anything extra that anybody would like to share in terms of events, networking? We pretty much, we've covered that a lot. I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask? Please post it in the chat. We have some time. I can ask some other questions too. Anybody have something that they really want to share?
I'll just go off of what Jim was saying before, the thought from there. Jim was talking about looking at the games and applying to a studio based on, I would say, just like echoing that across the industry to everything, right? Like if you're interested in feature animation, then understand what feature animation storyboards look like or animation reels look like versus what a game animation reel would look like versus what a big AAA game would look like versus what a small, you know, indie game or something that's, you know, a side scroller or something versus what, you know, could be aliens, monsters, live action, robots, right? Like creature animation is very different than character animation, very different than game animation. And so really getting an understanding of like, who are you as a person and what do you want to do for your career 40 hours a week? Because I think that so many people are like, I'll do whatever, but it's like, no, you have to be happy that like, this is going to be your job 40 hours a week. And you're going to be putting in your sweat, blood, and tears. I mean, hopefully not that dramatic, but like that's what you're putting into your everyday. And if you're not happy doing creature animation, you'd rather be doing character animation, then spend the time now and putting that effort into your reel to get yourself into the feature world versus live action. So I just wanted to stand on.
Sorry.
Something else you wanted to say, Jim?
No, all right.
Well, say, you said no.
All right. I love talking to a brand new developer after 6 months. I'll pull them aside because when they first get their first job as a developer, they're like, oh my God, I'm a game developer. Oh my God. And I always like to grab them like 6 to 8 months afterwards. I'm like, so game developer, nobody told me it'd be work. I love when that happens, when the absolute crushing thought of actually like, oh my God, I have to go to work every day. And I'm like, it's not just fun and games. I would love for it to be fun and games every day, but it's not. It's work. And not only do you have to and I always hate saying this too, you're an investment to your company. And we don't hire you unless you're a worthwhile investment. And I mean, that sounds terrible,
Yeah,
but
they're
absolutely true.
I already told them they're elevator assets. You know,
and when I get to know them on a different level, and you get to let them see that, this is going to be their career forever and ever. Oh, did I freeze? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you're not moving.
Oh, there we go. But the thing is like, it's the one thing that I know you do. I know you tell them this is a job. This is a career. This is something you have to put forth the effort to. There are so many schools out there that sugarcoat what we do and make it sound like it's the greatest day at Disneyland ever. And then when they get there, they get hit with this blast of reality that it's a job.
Yeah.
And I want them to understand that it is a job, and it's hard. It's not an easy job.
Right. Well, I mean,
nothing that we do is easy.
Oh, and that's what's so great about our faculty is they're all working professionals. So
that's why I always love talking to your school, because I get real students out of your school.
Thank you. We're happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Couple questions that have come in. How would you recommend people go about pivoting their career direction within the same company they currently work for? For example, if they're an artist, but they want to go into editing. So Kathleen, let's start with you.
I mean, I guess we're going to base this on the assumption that this company has both those opportunities. My recommendation and how I would appreciate any employee kind of wanting to make career changes is you need to talk to your direct manager first, which I know can be a little uncomfortable if you're like, I want to make this move, but hopefully you work in a space where they're encouraging and wants to work with you on your career roadmap and want to keep you within the studio. I suppose if you don't feel comfortable speaking with your direct manager immediately, depending again on the company, within Framestore, we've got, obviously me in recruitment, but we also have what we call our crewing managers in each site, or department managers when you get into some of our larger studios. Maybe talking to one of them or with an artist manager to kind of say, I'm interested in maybe pivoting and doing something different. We hold annual reviews at our company every year for all of our employees. So it's in those types of meetings, not that I think you'd have to just wait for your annual review, but, hopefully in those conversations, you're bringing those topics up of like, oh, I'd really like to explore this other arena. So that would be my recommendation. We have again, just Framestore specific, have an internal kind of recruitment policy and kind of how we move people around to other studios as well. So when people say, I'm in London and I want to work in New York, we have to kind of go through a chain of making sure everyone's aware. And we do really try to do that wherever we can. And same with people that want to explore new opportunities within the company, going from, say, marketing to an artist role or something like that. We'll try to facilitate that as much as possible, but it does require kind of speaking to your boss and saying, boss, I'm interested in exploring this. There's really no real way around that, I suppose.
Yeah.
I also think that you can't rely on the company to just train you, right? Like, and granted, some companies do have internal training programs, and that might be an option. But I like the question is specifically like, what if you're an artist and you want to go into editing? You can't expect the company just to be like, we're going to drop everything and train you how to be an editor. So you have to go in to that conversation with your editing chops and potentially your editing reel and say like, hey, listen, I have this background, or I've been working on this on the side and have this reel together, and or maybe befriend some of those people in that department and start talking to them a bit about like what you can do to kind of better your reel or better your work on the side. So granted, yes, like I mentioned, there are certain companies that will have internal training opportunities. It's not guaranteed in any place. And I also just think there's so much work you have to do on your own in order to make, like, that's a big leap, right? Like artist to editor is a big leap, where like an effects artist to maybe a character effects artist might be a smaller leap, or a lighter to a compositor might be a smaller leap.
I've watched a lot of people go from art to production.
Or production to art, right? Yeah. Or story to animation, or animation to story.
But a lot of art, of course, art students, graduate with a bachelor's degree in art. And they will start as an artist in a company and then realize they don't want to do that every day, that they like being involved in the whole project and running everything, right? Jim, what about you? How do people pivot within the game industry?
They do it all the time, but it depends on the studio. Again, if you say you go to something like Santa Monica Studio, or you go to something like, well, Riot's pretty open, but most of the time when you go to that studio, that is your job. When you go to something small like Squirrels, or even like Obsidian, or some of the others that are smaller studios, if you have, like, I've seen a lot of artists become designers. And yes, I have seen a lot of artists become producers, but they have to have a certain mindset to be a producer. They can't just say, oh, today I'm tired of being an artist, I want to be a producer. You have to have that certain something to be a producer. Like it used to be the thing that you start in games being a game tester, and then you go into production. That's not true. I mean, it does happen, but it's not always the way, because you have to have a mind to be that other job. Does that make sense? I see it all the time. People are like, oh, if I do this, then I'll get a job. And it's like, that's super not true. And to be able to change from discipline to discipline, like artists going into tech art, that happens a lot. Artists going into VFX in games, that happens quite a lot, because there's 20,000 jobs for environment art, but there's only 1 or 2 VFX jobs. And if you get a VFX job in the game industry, everybody wants you. I mean, we fight over VFX people all the time,
And it's funny, that's become the smallest element of our program recently, because
I do not know why.
I don't either. And there's a perception that it all went to Canada. There are no
that's so not true. Yeah, it's so not true.
I know it's not true.
I always I have a friend, Aaron Dubois, at another studio, and I used to tell him all the time, if I would have known that VFX was going to be the way it was, I would have not done animation. I would have squared away on VFX.
And people just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So this is kind of related. It's a question that says, with focusing your skills in a certain area or niche, how important would you say it is to learn and develop skills in other areas in order to start or keep a career in the movie game industry? Go ahead.
Can I make one quick?
Sure.
I'll add to that real quick, and then
Okay.
the others can jump in. Always when you get at a job, always look at the person above you, or a couple of people above you, and always eye on their job. Always. Never let that, and if you don't want that kind of gig, then you're probably in the wrong place. If that.
And what about developing skills in other areas? Does that enhance your upward mobility?
Oh, yeah. If you're an artist and all of a sudden you decided you wanted to start learning scripting languages to lighten up the load on other people, and it makes it easier for you to get to your work faster, then I always say, learn everything that you can. Try to be the best person for your studio, or your whatever, your company. But, you know, if you have the opportunity to learn something new, take it. Oh, I always used to love students that go, oh, when I'm done with college, I'm done with college. I laugh at them so much all the time because you never stop learning, ever, ever.
My
ever.
tombstone's going to say, here lies Kathleen. She was a lifelong learner.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's when you stop learning,
Yep.
when you're dead. So does anybody else have anything they want to add to this sort of skill mix? Deb?
I'm so sorry. I have to put myself on mute for a bit. My son is crying for me.
Okay. That's all right.
I will be
He's
back
been
if I
dealing with
can.
his- I think with his dog. So he's been doing that too. Kathleen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that in terms of?
I mean, I would say as much as you can have a holistic view of what it takes to deliver a project, the better you're going to be at any role that you have within the pipeline, if you will. So yes, learning new skills is only going to benefit you and help you advance. You know, I think there is a place for those individuals that might not want to necessarily go to the next level in their career. We always need people to execute shot work and do that. So if that's who you want to be, there's a place for you, I'm sure. But I do think kind of finding what's happening next, seeing what your producer's going through and appreciating what their skill set has to be to help execute their task and keep everything moving forward is really beneficial. In advertising, we work with a lot of generalists, so it really does help to have those individuals that can kind of jump between a few different tasks. They're usually grouped together in logical ways, like you've got asset artists that'll do modeling and texturing. Some animation tends to get quite specific. You don't tend to have animators that deviate from focusing on animation too much, but same with rigging. But like we've got look dev lighting artists, some of our lighters can do some basic comp, etc. So it's like, it helps to have at least a basic understanding of what everyone on your team is going through so that you can better serve each other. Because again, you're all working together. It's a collaborative effort. So there's never any harm ever in learning a new skill and better understanding what's going on. It'll never hurt you.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit as well, and this is specific to social skills. What are some social skills that you see the younger generation lacking and could improve on in the professional world?
Ooh, please let me do this one.
Oh, go ahead.
Manners,
What do you mean by manners?
being polite,
Mhm.
listening before, or the biggest thing that I always see that people get rejected for is the interviewer will be talking to them and then they start talking before the interviewer's done
Mhm.
asking a question. Always listen. Just be quiet for a moment
Yeah.
and
Or
listen to what
looking
they
at their
have to
phone.
say.
We're looking at their phone.
Oh, if you're going into an interview, you leave your phone in the car.
Mhm.
It won't give you the opportunity to think about it while you're sitting in the lobby of whatever studio you're in. Just leave it alone. And I know it's like,
Yeah, believe me. I mean, I'll just say faculty coming through because they're all walking around like this.
yeah,
They all,
exactly.
and now with so much on Zoom, we're all become Wall-E. It's just us and a screen and no people, looking around,
Well, I love the idea of AR. I think it's amazing. VR, I don't like. I like the others. I don't like having things on my face and on my eye, over my eyes. I barely like wearing my glasses most of the time. Right.
Yeah.
But like AR, I see the best in that. Like one day it's going to give me a holodeck and I'm going to be way okay with that.
Mhm.
And eventually meetings are going to be like that, where you can have a meeting in an office and it's just going to be AR people sitting in the office with you.
Oof, I'll probably be retired by then. Kathleen, did you have anything you wanted to add on that question about, social skills?
I don't know if it's a social skill, but I think I've noticed a shift in kind of expectations and perhaps a subtle sense of entitlement from kind of new graduates and people kind of getting into their career. And not that I'm a proponent for wanting everyone to suffer through what I suffered through when I graduated in the Great Recession of, of my time, but that kind of expectation that everything should be figured out for you. I think there's a little bit of lack of initiative to do your own research, to find out about, what the company might do, or maybe about where the location of the opportunity may be, and instead expecting us to feed you all that information of where you should live in this city, or, those types of things. That I think is lacking a little bit. I think everyone's kind of expecting everything to be handed to them on a silver platter. And I miss a little bit of that chutzpah, I guess, of just figuring it out and diving
Good
into
word.
it.
Everybody gets a trophy. I watched that as my daughter was growing up, and I'm like, what are you doing? She doesn't deserve a trophy.
Yeah.
Don't give her a trophy.
Yeah, I come from a long line of, if you don't get up and do it for yourself, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Your leg's broken.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what my mom used to say to me. I'd say, "Oh, can I have more juice? Are your legs broken?" The refrigerator right there. And I said the same thing to my kid. But we're closing down on 8:28, and so I want to thank. Oh, look at Deb as her baby.
Oh,
That's the 3-year-old. Oh,
He's tired.
thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to thank everyone.
Let me just thank everybody. Deb Stone from Illumination, Jim Rivers from Blind Squirrel, Kathleen Ruffalo from Frame Store. Thank you all for being here.